Thank you so much for joining today's class. Today we'll be looking at the last area for our Microsoft Defender for Office 365. So far we've looked at different parts of emails and collaborations. Last week we looked at rules and some parts of policies. So today we'll be looking at one particular blade, which is called Attack Simulator Training. So what is Attack Simulator, right? Now, in organizations with Microsoft Defender Plan 2 as an add-on, which is also included in Microsoft 365 E5, you can use the Attack Simulator training in the Microsoft Defender portal to run realistic scenarios in your organization. Now, some of the agendas we'll be looking at introduction, then the permissions and the roles. Then we'll look at what simulation is itself. Then creating simulations. What are the things we need to take note of before creating simulations? And we'll look at what payloads are. Then reports and insights. Then PCR, which is predicted compromise rates. Then we'll look at training and without tricks. Then we'll conclude the class there. Now, looking at the overview of the attack simulator training. So in introduction, so I mentioned that it is only available in for organizations that have Microsoft Defender for Office 365 Plan 2. Even though you have Plan 1, you'll not be able to run realistic attacks. And the goal of the attack simulation training is to help identify vulnerable users in your organizations. Now, today in my organizations, for example, now, every now and then when there's going to be an event, like the recent one that we did, there was going to be an award night for employees, right? So we'll call it SWA award. Now, an attack simulation was run, although we don't use Defender for Office 365 for us. We don't use a Microsoft one. A third-party solution is what we use. Now, what we did in the attack simulation, we sent an email to all employees that, oh, because before now, HR has sent an email for nominations for all users. So we use that event and say, okay, let's create a phishing campaign to say that, oh, you have been nominated for the SWA award. Click on this link to fill the form with your details. And a lot of users, they fell for it. They didn't check the sender's email. The sender's emails looks exactly like the sender that usually send emails to everybody in the organization, right? Only that number 2 was append to the email, in which it's actually obvious, but we don't pay attention. Then the landing page of the attack simulation was also close to how our HR portal is. So when you click on the link, it takes you to a page that looks like our HR portal, but if you check the URL, it's not the same URL. That's another way to, they could have detected it. Then putting in their credentials. So there was a form for them to put in to sign in, right, before they can access it. So at the moment they sign into that form, they just got a page that you have just been phished by your IT team. So there was now some levels of training that was provided that the sender's address was actually wrong, the URL too, and they pointed out stuff like that, to train the users to be more, because the goal at the end of the day is that we want to identify vulnerable users, right? And again, the simulated attacks can help you to identify and find, vulnerable users before a real attack impacts your bottom line in the organization. Then for organizations that don't have this particular subscription, Defender for Office 365 there's a 90 days trial for the Microsoft Defender HDR for Office 365 Plan 2, right? So there's a trial that is available, and the trial is for 90 days. So organization can actually try this particular feature if they actually, want to see how it looks. Then signing up for the trial is still on the Defender for Port and Defender portal, right? That's where they can actually sign up for the trial. And for the simulation training itself, it's actually a realistic attack scenarios, right? You are running simulations to actually prepare for real attacks. and the goal is to protect your organization's bottom line. Now, so we mentioned again the licensing requirement for this particular solution. So you must have Microsoft 365 E5 because it's an add-on. This or have Microsoft Defender for Office 365 Part 2. So this Defender for Office 365 Part 2 is part of this Microsoft 365 E5. So if you have maybe Office 365 E5 or Microsoft 365 E3, so you can get this alongside the Microsoft 365 E3 has Defender for Office 365 Plan 1. So because Plan 1 does not have the capability, to actually run that particular attack simulation, you need to get this particular add-on for it. And in terms of support, there's a support for on-premise mailbox. So when you're in an organization that maybe there is an hybrid, or you have Exchange server, right? So they support but reduce reporting functionality. That is one of the limitations around that for on-premises mailboxes. So if you have users in your on-prem mailbox, the only thing they won't be getting is they will get a reduced report capabilities as well as functionalities. Now, how do we assess the Defender Portal? So in the course of our training, we've been assessing the Microsoft Defender Portal through either clicking on from the admin center, then clicking on the security blade as one of the part of the admin center, and the other way is to actually go through the URL support.microsoft.com. So this will actually take us to the Defender Portal. And in the Defender Portal, so we've been doing our discussion on Defender for Office 365, Office 365, Defender for Office 365, right? We've been doing things on this emails and collaboration blade. So from this email and collaboration blade, we'll actually see the attack simulation training. Let me quickly bring that up. Second. So if you go to the admin center, you can show all and click on security. Sign in. 1 second.
Okay.
And in the Defender Portal, you come to emails and collaboration. So you're going to see the attack simulation training here. Before now, it used to be called Attack Simulator. Before Microsoft now rename it to Attack Simulation Training. Let's go back to our presentation, right? And in terms of availability, so there are some region that the product is not currently available for. So this URL will actually, give us some informations about the availability, which I don't want to go into in the session for now. Now, what are some of the security recommendations for the attack simulator, right? Now, it is very important that you use roles with fewer permissions. There are some roles that can actually do the attack simulations. So you don't necessarily need to use the global administrator role. Now, lower permissions accounts are actually recommended by Microsoft in terms of security when you want to run this attack simulator, because if you're trying to use the global administrator, which is highly privileged, it's not really necessary. And you should actually limit the global administrator role to emergency scenarios, and if possible, use existing rules that are possible. Then in terms of emails and collaboration permission, adding users to this group is not supported for now from Microsoft. And also for the Microsoft Defender XDR Unified RBAC, that's a role-based access control, it is also not currently supported. So what are the rules that can actually perform this attack simulator? Now, again, in terms of permissions, Microsoft entry permission are actually required, and membership in a specific role is actually also required. So if you have a group of users, maybe your IT department, they are assigned a particular a particular subscription, a particular role, for example, now in terms of RBAC, so those particular users will be able to perform the attack simulators. First, so a global admin, which have full access to all the settings, all the features in the Microsoft Entra ID, can actually perform this attack simulation. Then also a security administrator who is responsible for managing security related features and settings can also, and perform an attack simulation. Then we have a specialized role in the Microsoft Entra ID roles and administrator that talk about attack simulation administrators. So any user that has been added, so either the users is a member of the security administrator or the users is a member of this attack simulation administrator, the user will be able to create as well as manage all aspects of attack simulation campaign, just like the security administrator that can actually manage everything around security. Then the last one is the attack payload author. So for this attack payload author, it can create payload that an admin can later use. So if an admin wants to use any of the payload to run the attack simulators, these attack payload authors can create such a payload for admin to use such. Now, what is simulation, right? What is simulation? Now, a simulation, we're mentioning attack simulation. A simulation in attack simulation training is the overall campaign that delivers realistic but harmless phishing messages to users. So the goal is to actually deliver realistic. But even though the campaign is realistic, it is actually harmless. So if users actually click on those phishing links or click on download the malware or the malware or the attachments, right, as part of the attack simulator, it's not going to actually compromise the user. Only that the admins will receive a report that this particular users has actually clicked on a link, which is actually a phishing link as a result of the attack simulator. So you'll be able to get the report of all the users that actually click on those links. So you know that, oh, these users, they still need to be trained on this particular on phishing, right? Trained on spams and all that. So from there, they will actually learn better, basically. So again, Microsoft recommend that it's very important that you use role that are actually not the global admin role. Now, what are the elements that are available for simulations? Now, for attack simulations, right? One of the things you have to consider is that who are the recipients, right? And when is the attack meant to happen? When is the email meant to actually happen? So here you are considering who received the simulated phishing messages. Do you want to target a particular group of users, or you want to target all the users in the organizations, or you're trying to see, okay, this particular group of users, maybe from the finance team, are they well grounded enough to recognize phishing email? Okay, let's target them, right? So you have to actually check who are the recipients. Then in terms of schedule, what is the timing or how frequent should a message be delivered, right? You want to look at, okay, how often should this message get delivered to these users? So who gets the simulated phishing emails and on what schedule? Should it be like a quarterly event that should happen in your organization? Should it be like something that should happen every month, like monthly events? Should it be every week, right? You need to actually, determine that. Then also trainings based on users' action, right? So training that user gets based on their action or lack of action, either for both correct or incorrect actions. So if they did the correct thing, do they need training for those, the correct action they need to take? Then if they did things that are not correct, maybe they click on the link they're not supposed to link. What are the training, right, that I need to assign, to those users? So those training that user gets based on their actions or lack of action, they are supposed to maybe report the email as phishing, because Microsoft actually provide that in our Outlook. So you want to report an email, this email is actually a phishing email. They are supposed to actually get training for them that is actually the correct action. Then delete the emails after reporting such email. Then the other part is the payload and the message composition, right? So the payload that's used in the simulated phishing emails, or a link or an attachment, and the composition of the phishing message. For example, the package delivered, there's a problem with your account, or you want a price. So those are the things that you also have to take a look at, right? What is the type of payload that you want to use? Is it an email attachment or a link? Then the theme of the message, maybe like, for example, now, I plan to do an attack simulation, right? Which is not approved anyway. And the goal is this. The users in the organization, one of the organization I'm managing, the users in the organization, they are expecting an email that will tell them that there's an annual bonus, right? That is available, right? So because users are expecting such emails, so I want to leverage on that team. Okay, to like having something like, okay, here is your bonus. Click on this, or something like click on this link, right? To actually, access, to fill a form to get access to the annual bonus you're supposed to get. So to see how many users will actually recognize that, oh, this is actually a phishing campaign or an attack simulation campaign, or they will click on the link because they are already expecting such an emails to be delivered to them. Then again, we have another part, which is the social engineering techniques, right? So what is the social engineering techniques that is used? So the payload and the social engineering techniques are actually, there's a relationship with them. They're actually closely related. So you have to look at, okay, this social engineering techniques I want to use is based on what the users are already expecting. They're expecting an email that the company will send them an email, and the email is based on for them to get access to their annual bonus. I don't know if this is making sense to you, right? So those two are
Yes.
actually very related. So these are the four elements, that are part of simulations. Now, then one of the things that's also very important is that in attack simulation training, there are multiple types of social engineering techniques that are available. So except for this last one here, which is the how-to guide, right? And these techniques they were created from the MITRE ATT&CK framework, right? So the different payloads that are available for different techniques. So you can't use payload A for a technique B. So you have to know, okay, which payload, which social engineering, based on the social engineering and the relationship between that social engineering skill and as well as the payload, it's very important. Now, the first one talks about the credential harvest. Now, an attacker will send the recipient an email that contain a link, right? So when the recipients click on the link, they are taken to a website that typically shows a dialog box that asks users, for their username and password. Now, typically, the destination page is themed to represent a well-known website in order to build the trust in the users. I gave the example of the SOAR award, right? So the landing page, after users click on that link alone, looks so convincing because it looks like our HR portal. So it was designed to look exactly like our HR portal. So people were clicking on it, they were putting their emails and their password. So maybe they click on submit like this, they're getting that message that, oh, you're just being fished by your IT department. Now take this training for them. So that is credential harvest. Now the second one talks about the malware attachments. Now for malware attachments, an attacker sends the recipient a message that contains an attachment. Now when the recipient opens the attachment, arbitrary code, for example a micro, runs on the user's device to help the attacker install additional code or further enrich themselves. So with malware attachment now, that's why we always advise users in the organization, be mindful of malware and email attachments. Be sure that you are actually expecting that attachment from that particular user. If you are not expecting it, you have to suspect that particular emails, especially when it contains an attachment from a user that you're not expecting it from. Now, the third social engineering is a link in attachment. Now, this technique is a hybrid of credential harvest as well as the other one here, which is malware malware attachment because there's a link inside an attachment, right? For this now, an attacker sends the recipient a message, right, that contains a link inside an attachment. Maybe there's an email attachment in Word document. Then inside the Word document that is the email attachment, there's not a link. Maybe there's a step to do something. There's not a link for them to click on. So the combination of both credential harvest and malware attachment is a link in an attachment. So when the recipient opens the attachment and they click on the links, they are taken to websites that typically shows a dialog box that asks the user for their username and the password. So typically the destination page again is themed to represent a well-known website in order to build trust for the user. Now, the next social engineering is the link to malware. Now, for the link to malware in the social engineering space, right, an attacker sends the recipient a message that contains a link to an attachment on a well-known file sharing site. For example, SharePoint Online or Dropbox, right? So when the recipient click on the link, the attachment opens. And once the attachment opens, arbitrary code, again, like macros, runs on the user's device to help the attacker install additional code, or further enrich themselves. So that is this technique is all about. So it's combination also, like that of the link in attachment. So there is a link, there is when the attacker sends the email, right? That link has an attachment in it. So that's a link to malware. Then we have drive-by URL. Now, the drive-by URL social engineering techniques is when an attacker sends the recipient a message that contains a link. Now, when the recipient clicks on the link, they are taken to a website that tries to run background code. Now, this background code attempts to gather further information about the recipient, or it can deploy arbitrary code on their device. Now, typically, the destination website is also a well-known website that has been compromised or a clone of a well-known website. So familiarity with website helps to convince the user that the link is safe to click. So for this old technique, we also call it watering hole attack for this drive-by. So a lot of things are involved. There is attacker sending the recipient message which contains a link, and the recipient clicking on the link taken to a website that tries to run background code. So watering hole attack, that is what this is also called. Then we have this OAuth consent grants. Now, for OAuth consent grants, an attacker, creates a malicious Azure application that seeks to gain access to data. This is why it's very important as a cloud security engineer, Azure security engineer, right? You have to be careful of stuff like this. So the attacker creates a malicious Azure application. So on Azure, there's what called app registration and enterprise applications. So they create and Azure applications. And most of the time, Azure applications or enterprise applications will seek to gain access to data. So what the application will do is that the application sends an email request that contains a link. Now, when the recipient click on the link, the consent grant mechanism of the application asks for access to data. For example, the user inbox. That's why today, in our organization today now, they have to stop every of our developers, especially our automation engineer, from creating applications on their own, right? So before now, even though my team, myself, I manage our Azure environment, right? So the guys in automation, so they create some internal applications for our process digitalizations, right? Now, once those applications are created, because they are not, they are just application, maybe administrator also, they are not the global administrator. Before an applications can be accepted, a global admin need to actually grant a consent for those applications, right? So because of this now, we are not sure. Okay, where is this? Is it a third party link that you are using to create this application from? Third party URL. So we have to be sure. So instead of you creating the applications, okay, So what I do is that, okay, we change the narrative. How, as a global admin, I'll work with you. What is the enterprise application you want to create? After creating the enterprise application for you, how will grant access using the global admin credential that I used to create the applications. And then there is nothing like OAuth consent grant, because I'm aware that I'm the one creating that application. But imagine that the application was created by a bad actor, right? On the Azure, and then they are looking for how to compromise. That's why today again, all our global admin accounts in my organizations is not licensed. So we don't even receive emails with it with our global admin, so that that account is not compromised based on something like the OAuth consent grant. Now, the last one, not the least, so which is not actually part of the stuff, call it how-to guide. Now, for how-to guide is basically a teaching guide that contains instructions, for users. For example, how to report phishing messages. So different how-to guide is something that is also available as part of the things that users can also benefit from. Now, it's very important that for every landing page in simulations, what are the things that you actually need to do for every landing page? Now, landing page in simulation is actually where users go when they open the payload. For example, now, after they send the email, they click on the link that go here and fill your form. You'll be nominated for this award. So that landing page that looks like our HR portal is a landing page in the simulation, right? So that's the place basically user will go when they open the payload. Now, it's very important that when you create a simulation, you select the landing page to use, and you can select either from a built-in landing page or a custom landing page, or you can create a new landing page while you're creating the attack simulations. So basically, users are directed here when they open the payload, and the selection of the landing page is also very crucial. Now, these are the type of landing pages that are available. They are built-in landing pages that Microsoft has provided for you to use. You can use them. Then you can decide, okay, I want to actually create some custom landing page, Now, so already you have already created those custom landing page down so that you can use for the payload later. Or as you're creating the attack simulation, once you get to the page or the stage of landing page, you can quickly create a new landing page at that point. So these are some of the things that are very, very important when creating a simulation landing page. Then there's also another page. It's called end user notifications, right? Now, end user notifications in simulation basically send periodic reminders to users. For example, is there any training assignments notifications, right? Or is there any reminder notifications? Maybe the user, for example, now has been phished, right? So there is a need for them to take a training based on the actions that they took being phished, right? Clicking on the link, then putting their credentials. So the end user notification page is where they will get training assignment notification and also a reminder notifications. And now also just like the landing page, there are different nomination and notification options. So there's a built-in notifications. There's also, you can create a custom notifications, right? That is just there that you can use later. Then while you are creating the attack simulation tool, you have the option to create a notification page also, right? On the fly while you're creating that particular attack simulation. Now, there's also what we call simulation automation, right? Now, for simulation automations, right, we have multiple social engineering techniques. Now, although an attack simulation training contains many built-in payload for the available social engineering techniques, right? You can actually create a custom payload to better suit your business needs, right? And you can create payload at any time and before you create simulations or during the creation of simulations, right? And for example, in simulations that uses maybe the first two example, credential harvest or a link in attachment social engineering techniques, right? Now, login page are part of the payload, right, that you select. And the login page basically, is a web page where users enter the credentials for the simulations. Now, for multiple social engineering techniques, it includes various techniques and related payload. And basically, in simulation automation, for traditional simulations, which can only contain only one technique, but for simulation automation, it can contain multiple related payload. Now, for automated scheduling options, it supports more than just one start and end date, and it offers enhanced scheduling flexibility. So these are some of the things you have in terms of capability for simulation automations, right? So again, for best training experience for simulated phishing message to make them as close as possible to a phishing attack that your organization might experience. So we check this around. What if you could capture and use harmless version of a real world phishing message that were detected in M365 and use them in a simulated phishing campaign? And you can, with payload automations, which is also known as a payload harvesting, you can create a payload automation. Now, in terms of payload, we have two types of payload, right? Now, before I move into the payload now, it's very important again. Simulation automations provide multiple social engineering techniques and related payloads, which can contain only one. And simulation automation supports automated scheduling options. That means more than just a start date or an end date, basically. Now, for payloads, we have built-in payload, which is actually available for various social engineering techniques. Then we have custom payload, which can be created to suit specific business need. And you have the option to copy and also customize an existing payload. For example, maybe an organization in the past has received an email, a phishing email in the past. You can pick that email, copy it, customize it to look like what should be, for your organizations. And in terms of timing for payload, right? So it's very important that before creating a bit, you want to look at, okay, what should you consider before creating simulations or during the creation of simulations. So payload are things that you actually need to actually consider. It's very important. Now, I mentioned login page for our payload. So login page is in simulation, either you use credential harvest or LinkedIn attachment techniques, right? So it's a web page where users basically enter their credentials, and like others too, you have the default and the custom login page. And each payload can only use a default login page, and there's option to actually change to built-in or custom login page. Then in terms of creating a new login page is actually very important. You can create this during the simulations or when you're creating the payload itself. Now we mentioned payload automations, right? So for payload automations, it's basically a realistic training experience using real-world phishing messages and with the payload automation techniques, right? So for realistic training experience, so we have a simulated phishing message, which should actually closely mimic a real attack. At the end of the day, you want to enhance the effectiveness of the training program because you want to ensure that at the end of the day, users are actually getting the knowledge based on this training. You're trying to ensure that they are not the vulnerable end of your system. Because at the end of the day, it only take one users, to be phished. Once the bad actor is inside the system, can begin to find his way using the lateral movement, right? Again, using the real world phishing message, you can capture harmless version of phishing messages detected in M365. So if you go to your incident and alert, for example, right, you can look for messages that have been, phishing message that Microsoft has detected It could even be messages in your quarantine portal, right? Use them to create your payload. So you can actually utilize this message in a simulated phishing campaign, right? Because these are like real world stuffs that the organization has experienced. So with that, you are able to use it, to create your attack training simulations. So for payload automation, which is also called payload harvesting, right? It helps you to automate the creation of realistic phishing simulations. And for this now, you can actually create it. It's available for you to actually create. The next one, we talk about the QR code payload. Now, Microsoft is actually just introducing this, right? So for attack simulation training also supports using the QR code in payload, right? You can choose the list of from the list of a built-in QR code payload, or you can create a custom QR payload. But it's very important you know that this is actually currently in preview, right? It's just being introduced by Microsoft. Because of that, it's not available in all tenants. It's not available for all organizations, and it's still subject to change because again, it's still in preview, right? And in terms of support for attack simulation training, it can actually be used in payload, right? Sometimes scanning a QR code is also not very, very advisable. In fact, probably because I don't know, I've not actually had to scan a QR code. So if there's a QR code to actually scan to fill a form or to access a website, I just usually gently tell them that, please, oh, can I get the URL to this QR code? Let me know what I'm scanning, right? Because again, QR code can actually be a link, a phishing link at the back end. So you can choose from a built-in QR code payload, or you can also create your own custom QR code, basically. Now, the next is monitoring simulation progress, right? So it's actually very important that we track what is happening, tracking simulation distributions. For example, now, by ensuring that all participants receive the simulation. So it's very important that after you create and launch an attack simulation, right, you need to see how this is going. For example, did everyone receive it? So you have to be sure. So there is a dashboard to show you, okay, how many users have actually received the attack simulation, right? Then you have to analyze participants' actions, right? Who did what to the simulated phishing messages and also the payload within it? Did they delete it? Did they report it? Or did they open the payload? Or did they enter credentials, etc.? So you need to be able to identify the actions taken on the phishing message, right? And you track interactions with the payload. So you want to ensure that, okay, this person, after receiving the email, did the person delete the email? Or did this report this email as phishing, right? Or is it one of those users that will click on the links to open it, and some other users after opening it, maybe that's when they came to their senses, oh, this is a phishing link. There's some users they will not steal, they'll still go ahead to even enter their credentials. So it's very important that you analyze all the actions of participants, right? Then again, after everything is said and done, and you have some users that were fished, right, based on the simulations. So you need to check that, okay, who has completed the assigned training? Because a training will automatically be assigned to those users based on their actions or their inactions. So you have to check who completed the assigned training. So those are the ways you also check again. So for example, now in my organizations, once there's a phishing campaign, a training follows it, right? It's actually a third-party training. So every that training is being monitored. If you've not completed the training within the stipulated time, expect an email from the HR, right? Because HR is working closely with our infosec team to ensure that every of such training is completed. Sometimes those trainings are just short trainings, 4 minutes. The last one I did was about 7 to 10 minutes. It's actually an assessment for all the training we've done in the quarter. They want to see people that are actually doing those trainings. So there's an assessment based on all the trainings for simulations that we've done so far. So you have to be able to check also, are people really doing training after they did an action or inaction? Then for there's a available report and insight, right? For an available report, and there's also what we call a predictive compromise compromise rate, which is actually a key metrics for evaluating whether or not our simulation is actually effective. So it's very important that you often need to tailor a phishing, a simulating phishing campaign for specific audience. So for example, now, if the phishing is too close to perfect, almost everyone will be fooled by it. And if the phishing message if the phishing message is too suspicious, no one will be fooled by it. So you have to actually check that, and that's what we call understanding the predicted compromise rates. So it's very important to for tailoring your phishing campaigns, right? So if the training is too perfect, almost everyone will be fooled. And if it is too suspicious, people can easily guess that, oh, this is a phishing email. So at that point, nobody will be fooled. So it's actually, very difficult to check the difficulty varies among the users, right? So, and the phishing message can sometimes, be considered difficult to identify or considered easy to identify by other users, right? So there's a need for us to like strike a balance between the two. We don't want it to be too perfect, right? We don't want it to be too suspicious. We want to actually strike a balance. So that's actually where the predicted compromise rate comes in, right? This basically indicates the potential effectiveness when the payload is used in a simulation. So the PCR, which uses an intelligent historical data across Microsoft 365, right, to predict the percentage of people who will be compromised by the payload. For example, in terms of components of the PCR, look at the payload content, or also the aggregated and normalized compromise rates from other simulation. Then also looking at the payload metadata too. So that's some of the things that I check. So the payload information, the PCR allows you to compare the predicted versus the actual click through the rate of your phishing simulations. And you can also use this data to see how your organizations perform compared to the predicted outcomes, right? Then the PCR information for payload is available whenever you view and you select a payload. This is always available, especially in terms of for reporting and also for insight. So as the admin, you can always check it. Now, how do we use the PCR data? That's the predicted compromise rates. Now, in terms of availability, so the availability of the PCR information, so is accessible whenever payload are viewed and selected, and it includes in specific reports and insight. Then in terms of reports featuring the PCR information, so a behavior, there's actually a behavior impact on the compromise rate card, and there's training efficacy tab in the attack simulation training, which is something that we're going to be looking at in our demo. Then also looking at training campaigns, right? Now for traditional phishing simulations, which present users with suspicious messages, and the following goals. What are the goals? Get users to report the message as suspicious, right? Then provide training after users clicks on or launch the simulated malicious payload and give up their credentials, right? But sometimes you don't need to wait for users to take correct or incorrect actions before you actually give them training, right? So it's always very important. Like my organizations, every month we do a training. It's an attack simulation training, right? It's a 4 minutes training that's just to ensure that people are, being cyber aware. Now, the attack simulation training, right, provides some of the features that are available, like the training campaigns, right, which is actually a training only assignment. So this one's basically for the attack simulation training itself, you can skip, right? Wait for users' actions. Just go straight into training. By training the users, get them the training that they need, because the core at the end of the day, you don't want them to be the vulnerable part of your business. Then for the training campaign itself, we have the training only assignment, right? For the targeted users. So any users that are targeted, that went through that were fish, you can actually do a training only assignment, and you can directly assign training without putting users, right, through a test of a simulations. You can just assign them training. Okay, do this training. So it's actually a best practice, right? And training campaigns makes it easy to conduct learning sessions like monthly cyber security awareness training. So it's very important. So that monthly sessions, it's one of the important things that you have to actually, consider. Now, we mentioned the how-to guide, right? Which is not actually part of our social engineering, the social engineering techniques, right? So for the how-to guide, right, the purpose basically is to provide a lightweight learning experience that is accessible directly in the user's inbox. So those how-to guide, you can just say how to, like in my organization, we have a series, we call it Do You Know? It's a Do You Know series. Do you know that when you click on just do something, do you know when you click on phishing link, there's possibility that your accounts can be compromised and then the organizations can be, can be at risk. So all those how to guide, okay, how do you spot if a message is a phishing email, right? Example, how do you report a phishing message? How do you recognize and report a QR phishing message? So all those how to guide, you provide it for your organization. So simulations based on the how to guide social engineering techniques is not, the purpose is not to test users. A how to guide is a lightweight learning experience that users can view directly in their inbox and following the built-in either how to guide availability, and you can also create a customized one by creating your own guide by copying or customizing an existing payload. That's about how to guide. Then for QR code training, right? For QR code training, this is actually, focus on. So attack simulation actually, provides a built-in training option for QR-based, attacks. So it could be like a training, there's a training module for malicious digital QR code, and there's also a training for malicious printed QR code. So like this one that is here now is malicious digital QR code that is okay, scan this code. I've never scanned a code, I'm telling you, even though I know the code is coming from. So I'll tell you, please, can you show me can you share the URL for me? Right? It's how to keep safe because I know how important my account is. You can't tell me to scan the QR code and sign in with my credentials and you want to compromise me. No, please send me the link instead. So for how to guide in simulations, it's basically a teaching guide to recognize and also report phishing QR messages. All right. So in conclusion, one of the things about attack simulator is that it's very important that this solution, you use it to ensure that users in your organizations are protected from phishing links or phishing attacks. Any question? Any questions? So that's actually the end of the slide. We'll actually
Okay.
jump to demo here.
No question.
All right. 1 second. Let me go to browser. All right. So this is our attack simulation training, right? Now, under the overview, we'll see things around to create a simulations, right? In creating the simulations, you can either launch an instance simulations or you can launch your own simulation, right? Then in terms of payload library, we have different payloads that Microsoft has provided, right? Built-in payload, and you also have the option to, go ahead to actually create your own custom payload, right? So that's under the overview. If you scroll down, you'll be able to see, okay, recent simulation. So if you have any recent simulation, I can run a simulation or automation simulation for your organizations. You see them there. So then different recommendations, right? Microsoft provide this particular card for you to be able to see different recommendation like launching a phishing simulation using other social engineering techniques, right? You see run multiple simulation using simulation automations, then explore payload library, you'll be able to see other things. Then if you come down, you see look for how many people have not received simulation. So that's talking about the simulation coverage. We mentioned that you have to monitor Did everybody receive the email? Then in terms of training completion, right, you'll be able to track the number of users who have completed the training in this particular task. So these are just dashboard that are available for shortcuts. Then you see this one, we have repeat offenders. This one you have to investigate repeat offenders in any simulation attacks. Maybe there are some people that no matter the training, they will just click on they are just going to get fish. So if they need special training, right? A repeated offender is a user who was compromised by consecutive simulations, so you can find them. So if they need to do special training for them, for those users, right? You'll be able to, advise the organization. Then in terms of behavioral impact on compromise rate, right? So for this, you have this to explore user behavior and the impact on the security. Microsoft provide this video here for attack simulation. I'm not sure if I'm sharing my screen with sound. I wanted us to listen to that. Let me stop sharing and reshare my screen with sound. Let me include sound. Okay, I have to change my speaker if I can use the sound. Smart. I'm using sound line to share with sound. Couldn't share with sound. Okay, now let me just share with sound for some reason. Let me just share.
Attack simulation training is an intelligent phish risk reduction tool that empowers employees to prevent attacks, measure users' awareness of phishing risk, provide actionable insights and recommendations to use hyper-targeted training that can change users' behavior, and then measure behavioral change through repeated simulations. All of this right in the Microsoft 365 Defender portal. On the attack simulation training page, you see the most recent simulations you've run. Plus, you know how many users in your org have experienced simulations and the percentage of users who have completed related trainings. On the right, you see how users' behaviors have impacted the compromise rate over time. And my favorite is the chart at the bottom of the page that describes that we recommend you run.
Okay, I was able to get that now. So let's watch the video.
Attack simulation training is an intelligent phish risk reduction tool that empowers employees to prevent attacks, measure users' awareness of phishing risk, provide actionable insights and recommendations to use hyper-targeted training that can change users' behavior, and then measure behavioral change through repeated simulations. All of this right in the Microsoft 365 Defender portal. On the attack simulation training page, you see the most recent simulations you've run. Plus, you know how many users in your org have experienced simulations and the percentage of users who have completed related trainings. On the right, you see how users' behaviors have impacted the compromise rate over time. And my favorite is the chart at the bottom of the page that describes the number of repeat offenders broken out by the type of attack. Of course, you can drill into this data with relevant filters to identify those people who need a bit more training to avoid these attacks. Next to that is a short list of simulations that we recommend you run and why. To get started, you can launch an individual simulation by selecting Launch a Simulation. Then, choose the social engineering technique you want to use. In this case, I'll go with the default, the Credential Harvest technique. Give the simulation a descriptive name, select Next, and then select the payload you want to use. In this case, I'll use the built-in 2 failed messages payload. Later, I'll show you how to create your own payloads. On the Target Users page, you can choose specific users and groups you want to target with this simulation, or you can simply target everyone with it. That's what I'll do here. Then, on the Assign Training page, configure how you want to handle training for users who demonstrate the need. Our huge library of phish training content enables personalized and highly specific targeting based on susceptibility score or simulation performance. In this case, I'll just use the recommended defaults, which is to use Microsoft content and assignments. but you can also use a custom landing page and assign specific trainings. All the trainings are brief, with most clocking in at under 7 minutes, but they can be an effective way to change users' behaviors. If you're using the Microsoft Training Experience, you can customize its header and body text. Don't forget to preview the page by selecting Preview Page. Not only does this page link users to assigned training, but it also gives them a tour of the email to explain the telltale signs they missed. Great stuff. Next, on the Launch Details page, specify when to start and how long to run the simulation. And then, review the details and submit the simulation to Microsoft 365 Defender. Once done, you see the simulation on the Simulations tab, along with all the others you've run or are running. At the top of this tab, you see the status of all these simulations, and you can select your new simulation to see its details. There's a lot of information here, like the impact of the simulation, or how many users it actually compromised. We provide an extensive list of payloads based on real-world attacks right out of the box, like the 2 failed messages payload I used earlier. There are more than enough to get started, but you can also create custom payloads. While you can certainly start from nothing, I prefer to use an existing payload as a starting point by selecting Copy Payload. Then, click through the wizard to customize each page. On the Configure Payload page is where you customize every detail of the payload. That includes sender information, the phishing link, tags and general information, language, and of course, the email body itself. You can edit this email any way you like. Moving on, remember earlier I mentioned that the landing page can show users signs that they might have missed? Those are indicators, and you can add them here on the Add Indicators page. Select Edit Indicator to edit an existing one, and click in the Indicator Preview area to see what it will look like to users. Once you're done, submit your payload to create it. There's just a few more things I want to show you in attack simulation training. The first is simulation automations, which can run simulations containing up to 10 payloads that you choose, or let us randomize, over a period of time. You select a start and end date, the days of the week to start simulations, maximum number of simulations to run, and whether to randomize the send times. Other than choosing the payloads and scheduling the automation, creating an automation is like creating a single simulation, so we don't need to walk through the process here. The second thing I wanted to show you is payload automations. Rather than trying to create payloads from scratch or using the built-in payloads, you can harvest payloads straight out of your Mailflow. In this case, I want to harvest payloads that phish credentials. You find those harvested payloads on the Payloads tab. The name begins with the name of the automation, making it easy to find them by simply searching for the name of the automation. We encourage you to try attack simulation training in the Microsoft 365 Defender portal to measure and improve users' behavior. To learn more about it, see our documentation on Microsoft Docs.
All right, so that's like the summary of everything we'll be doing. In our next class tomorrow, we'll look at the overview, simulations, we'll look at the trainings. Currently, I'm not sure, I don't have any simulation on this particular tenant. Look at trainings, look at reporting. Okay. Okay, I'll stop the record.